Hi, it's Ann Parker. I'm a past national president. I have the opportunity to today go over with you the 2025-2026 financial policies that were approved at the convention earlier this year in Milwaukee. We talk about on page I what a budget is, its primary purpose as a financial roadmap, guiding resource allocation, facilitating planning, and enabling performance evaluation, ultimately contributing to the success of the organization at every level. The financial policies and budgets are tools which the membership communicates their desired goals in light of realistic resources that are available. Accurate accounting and regular reporting will provide information to the members regarding the expenses and the income of the organization at every level. The budget process is a critical tool for decision making. It helps evaluate the resources and plans for the future. It is a living document. Can be modified by, on the national level, the executive board with help of the National Financial Committee, and at the chapter level by the board and its members, and the department level follows the same procedure as the national level, as does the auxiliaries. Every member should be familiar with these policies. It's every member's responsibility to know them, not just your financial officers. II page talks about purpose and philosophy of financial policies. The management of operations of Blue Star Mothers of America on the financial level is to fulfill the organization's mission in the most effective and efficient manner and be accountable to our stakeholders, which includes our members, donors, partners, and the community. We want to be transparent. We want to make sure that all levels of our organization operate in accordance with the IRS code for 501c3s. Division of responsibility starts on page 1. You'll see them listed. The executive board is to review and approve approved budgets that are proposed. They are to review and approve changes in the policy on the national level before it goes to the convention delegate. Each chapter must abide by these financial policies. There is no deviation. You will see things in here that pertain only to national, but there are other aspects in this policy that are relevant and must be abided by your chapter and auxiliaries and the department. The executive board should review all annual and periodic financial statements and information, and they should review all contracts. The president acknowledges that she has read and understood these policies, and she is to review and approve all contracts, sign all contracts, engagement letters, management representation letters, tax returns, etc., as authorized by her board. The first VP also says she's read them and that she is an authorized signer on the account in only cases of emergency. The financial secretary acknowledges receipt and reading of these documents. She is to be a co-signer on the bank account. Along with the treasurer, she holds a debit card. These are the only two officers that hold a debit card, the treasurer and the financial secretary. She reviews all invoices with the treasurer. She reviews all and receives statements of all accounts like Venmo, PayPal, Square, etc. She prepares annual and periodic financial statements and makes them available to all members. She responds to public requests for information, and based on the annual budget as a guide in cooperation with the treasurer, she monitors the balances in the bank account to make sure that the budget can be expended as planned or make changes to be proposed as necessary. The treasurer also says she's read these documents, and she, along with the financial secretary, is the secondary holder of the debit card. Upon receipt of invoices, she consults with the financial secretary. They have authority to do this and would refer back to minutes that the organization has or an approved budget. She enters all payments, disbursements, and expenditures into the accounting system, whatever it is at that level of the organization. On the national level, she maintains the online store The Finance Committee on the national level goes over the budget to be sent to the National Executive Board and to the convention body. They review all extra payments and they keep the budget forefront as they make decisions at how our finances should be spent, making those recommendations to the National Executive Board. On the chapter level, the Executive Board also reviews the budget, the financial statements, and makes recommendation to the membership at the chapter level. But the chapter's members make those final decisions. On the national level, the convention delegates review the annual budget and they review and make approval or denial of suggested changes. All members are to understand the mission of Blue Star Mothers and to make themselves familiar with all the governing documents, which include charter, constitution, bylaws, code of conduct, affiliation agreement, and the annual budget and financial policies. At every level, it is important that members review the financial statements. At the chapter level, as I mentioned, we review and approve all non-budgeted expenditures. Blue Star Mothers at any level maintain accounting by the accrual basis. The day the information is entered into whatever system you're using, that's the date. So if you make a deposit today in QuickBooks, but you don't get to the bank till tomorrow, it remains at today's date. Restricted and unrestricted funds. A donor may restrict funds for a particular purpose, like care packages, and only the donor can unrestrict those funds. You must keep them and spend them only for those types of expenditures. The donor can write a letter, he can put it on his check, he can attach a note to the check at any level. But you must follow the donor's request. No executive board can change that. General financial accounting. The IRS says there are 3 categories. Program, which means things that are used to promote the organization, newsletters, brochures. Management means the things that run the office, if you will, bookkeeping, phone, meeting, oversight, and fundraising is just that. We talk about fixed assets on page 4, which are expenditures for equipment are recorded at cost. So if you purchase a laptop, it is recorded at cost, and it states there the depreciation method, which is a straight line method with a useful life of 2 to 10 years. Section E talks about accounting and financial records. Administrative access is granted only to the financial secretary and the treasurer if you're using an online service like QuickBooks. Please, if you're not using online QuickBooks, make sure that your accounting records are backed up on a stick, a hard drive backup system. Somehow they need to be stored in another place. At the end of the year, all financial reports are recorded and stored with the recording secretary. That means all your financial reports should be in the recording secretary's email. Once you're no longer a financial officer, those records must be surrendered to the incoming officers. Now let's talk about retention. General financial records and receipts, an electronic or hard copy, should be maintained for a period of 7 years, with the exception of remote deposit checks. If you're recording those checks with the bank on a remote system, you must keep them in a secure storage area, not available to others, and destroy them after 90 days. Financial reports will be submitted to the general membership not less than quarterly, and sooner if you are able to do so. Auxiliary organizations are required to maintain their financial records the same as those of the parent company. And auxiliaries should submit their financial records to the respective national or department financial secretary on not less than a quarterly basis. The Gavel Club, which is the Past Presidents Club, is exempt for this because we only have money once a year at convention, and then we immediately disperse that money out to the charity of our choice. Number 3 on page 5 talks about annual compliance. And the annual compliance of the auxiliary must take place just like the chapters and departments to be completed in the first quarter of the new year. Article 3, Section A, an annual audit. On the national level, we engage the services of a CPA to do a financial review and to help prepare our 990 tax return. Section B, departments and chapters are required to complete the annual compliance reporting of our organization through their profiles on the national webpage. The auxiliary has the same responsibility. They are to upload confirmation if they filed the 990 or the 990N postcard that it was accepted by the IRS. No chapter, no department, no auxiliary is exempt from this annual compliance. Another part of annual compliance is the bank verification. It must be submitted annually, even if there's no change, and at any time in the year when the officers who are bank account signers may change. By signing this bank verification letter, the president at any entity is verifying the signatures for those that are on file with the bank. Number 3, the chapters and departments will contribute to the National Veterans Affairs Voluntary Services Fund of $45 or more each year as a part of their annual compliance. Section E talks about games of chance. If your organization is going to have any type of game of chance, this would include raffles, bingos, lottery type activities. Please check with your state and see what the requirements, if any, are for being registered or timeliness of those events long before you plan or publicize those events. Section D says, with the exception of the Gavel Club, every department, chapter, and auxiliary is required to obtain a post office box, have a registered agent, or a permanent non-residential address for correspondence. There is no exception to that. Section E on page 6 says if you change your address at any level of the organization, chapter, auxiliary, department, you must file a forwarding address with the post office, update your profile in the chapter information report, update the EIN report on the national website, and notify your bank, of course, and complete Form 8822B with the IRS. It is your responsibility to take care of this. Section E talks about if you get permission from the national president to use the logo in fundraising, 25% net proceeds from this permitted logo usage will be submitted, to the National Financial Secretary by August 15th with a report indicating the gross proceeds, the net cost, and net proceeds, along with the statement of intent to end or extend said project. The department, chapter, auxiliary must be in good standing to receive any funds from national, such as due for membership, chapter grant funds, or other reimbursement. One of those requirements to be in good standing is all compliance documents must be submitted and approved. Article 4 talks again about budget. On the national level, we said that is set at the National Convention. And at the chapter level, proposed annual budget should be prepared by the chapter financial secretary, the chapter treasurer, and presented to the chapter board by September 1 of each year to be taken to the membership after the chapter board approves it. P.O. Box is a permanent part of any annual budget at any level of this corporation. Section B in Article 4. Convention delegates may approve a donation at the national level of up to 15%, 45%, or $1,500 of the annual net income to 501c3 organizations supporting our mission. So it's up to a donation of $1,500 or 45% of the annual net income. The funds are allocated equally to 3 different 501c3s voted on and approved by the convention body. The final donation amounts will be determined based on the year-end audited financial statements. Section 2 on page 7 talks about the National VAVS Fund. National organization may match up to 100% of the VAVS funds received from departments and chapters. continued on the availability of funds. Number 3, our president every year goes to women in military service at 2 occasions, Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and we have in our financial policies that we will make a semi-annual monetary contribution in lieu of placing a wreath on their stage during those ceremonies. Section C talks about fees and assessments. Membership fees are currently set at $30 per member. If a member joins a chapter after June 1 of any given year, their payment will be credited for the upcoming fiscal year. We've talked about the VAVS fund of $45 or more each year as part of compliance. Any new department or chapter chartering will submit, along with their paperwork, a $25 check to National for their charter. Article 5, we ask that your accounts, your checking accounts, be FDIC, Federal Deposit Insured Corporation, or NCUA, which is National Credit Union Association. So we want to make sure your money is insured. Section B, the annual budget is the authority for the president to approve payments for services and financial commitments. Funds will be dispersed upon proper documentation and receipts. No check will be made to cash. When this is required for a fundraising event, a check may be issued to a member designated for obtaining the startup funds. Proper accounting of those startup funds will be necessary by matching the disbursement to the subsequent repayment. So if you write a check to your treasurer properly signed by 2 officers, she goes to the bank and cashes it. She uses those $5 bills or whatever her change is. At the end of a fundraiser, a separate deposit is made to put that $100 back in the account. And then there's a separate deposit also for any funds that are collected after the $100 is deducted. Section D, there shall be no credit cards at any level of the organization. As stated earlier, the 2 financial officers, financial secretary, and the treasurer are the sole holders of the debit card, and they are not to loan them out. Section B talks about a daily limit on use of those debit cards, which most likely will pertain to the national level. So upon approval of the executive board, the financial secretary will contact the business service, the selected financial institution, to obtain a debit card for herself and the treasurer. And the executive board will review the standard daily limit options available and select what is appropriate for their level, be it department, chapter, or auxiliary. On the national level, we do this quite regularly to pay convention cost. Section C talks about the debit card may be used for approved travel, convention-related expenses, organizational floral expenses, most likely on the national level at Memorial Day and Veterans Day, general authorized purchases to conduct business like postage, ink, paper equipment, and other opportunities, but not limited to online store purchases on the national level, yearbook deposit payments on the national level. The debit card is to meet all required transparency criteria, whether it is used by the financial secretary or the treasurer. They are to include communication to each other before its use for the secondary authorization. The same thing would be on bill pay. The treasurer would authorize a bill pay only after she sought the concurrence of the financial secretary and has her email approving concurrence with a particular bill that is to be paid. All checks, no exceptions, must have 2 signatures. They most likely will be the treasurer and the financial secretary. Under no circumstances should checks be pre-signed. Your chapter checks should have chapter state and number on them, and the first VP signature will be added only to the checking account served for emergency purposes only. Non-financial officers are not to be involved in the disbursement or recording of transactions. Repetitive payments to the same vendor are most easily paid through the bank's ACH EFT system. So as I said, if you have an ACH or a bill pay, once the treasurer receives the approval to pay an item, she'll enter the transaction in whatever accounting system your bank uses. It's bill pay, or you're authorizing a payment strictly through the checking account under ACH. She'll then immediately email the financial secretary with a request to review this, and then to ensure that the proper amounts were paid, the finance secretary will reply to the treasurer confirming that the entries are correct. And as I said, this will be kept on file with your receipts. The financial secretary makes all deposits. The treasurer does not. Non-financial officers are not to be involved in any of this, and all statements for debit cards and other accounts like Venmo, PayPal will be obtained by the financial secretary, who will review and reconcile those accounts on a monthly basis. The financial secretary must make financials available to view by providing the records to be viewed, handing out copies, or sending by email. Most chapters now, the national level and department will send those copies by email to the members. The public may request these reports and records and should receive them promptly upon request. And by promptly, it doesn't have to be done right then and there, but I would say a good rule of thumb is within maybe 2 weeks. On the national level, there's the 30-day refund policy with regard to new membership dues or online purchases. Section H talks about uncashed checks, what to do at 90 days, 180 days, 200 days, and when and how to void the check, and what you should report there to the National Association of Unclaimed Property. It's a very specific procedure to be followed, and by every level of the organization. Non-sufficient funds. Anytime a payment is received at any level of the organization and is returned to the bank for any reason, such as non-sufficient funds, all associated banking fees are to be reimbursed to that entity within 15 days. Any respective membership status will be placed on hold until this is taken care of via certified funds, not with another check. Has to be a money order, cash, or a bank check from the bank, a cashier's check. Number 6, spending and grants. Each level of the national department and auxiliary approval is required to spend funds, making a financial commitment to projects that have not already been incorporated in the budget. On the chapter level, the chapter they have a new project they want to fund that's not in their budget. The chapter executive board would bring that to the membership, and that's where it's approved. Email voting, section 6B, should be issued by the president when a financial urgency arises requiring an expenditure not to exceed $500. Motion must be made, seconded, and have a quorum of approved votes for those who reply. This action would take place through reply all and needs to be ratified at the next regularly scheduled meeting. Chapter grants. A grant from National to assist a new charting chapter to startup cost the existing chapter with mission-related cost is established. This grant program is overseen by the National Finance Committee. It allows a new chapter to apply for a grant of $250. These instructions of how to apply and the application are on the national website. The National Financial Secretary, the National Finance Committee is in charge of administering this program. There's also a program that existing chapters may apply for a chapter grant every 2 years for a specific project. The project must not have been completed at the time the application is applied for. So you're applying for projects that you will complete only upon completion of the approval process with the Finance Committee. And if it's not approved, then of course your chapter would be responsible for that. But don't apply for a grant after you've done something. Section D talks about incurring and paying national expenses. The things that are allowed on the national level are stated there, such as BABS payments, restocking the store, bank charges, expenses of the officers that sit on the national level and appointees. The Ambassador Fund, members of the NEB sometimes need to go visit chapters or departments. There's money in the budget for that particular item. If we ever on the national level decided to hire an executive director, have someone on salary, currently we have no one on salary, rental of space or furnishings, that would have to require National Executive Board pre-approval. The National Convention is at the decision of the then sitting president. She'll work with the treasurer to make arrangements for all hotel expenses. We'll have a store there. We'll have outside vendors. They'll pay $50 a table, and chapters will pay $25 a table if they'd like to sell things for their own fundraising and national convention. The Gavel Club, which is the past national presidents who raise money once a year for a predetermined charity, and the Big Dipper, which raises funds for educational assistance, will have a table they won't have to pay for. Each year we hold a silent auction at convention, and the proceeds from that will go forward to help defer some of the expenses for the next year's convention. The past national presidents serving on the National Executive Board, national elected officers, national parliamentarian, national governing documents committee during a governing documents year, which we said was every 3 years. The last was 2024. The next will be 2027. National nominations chair, national website, and national chaplain will be provided complimentary national convention registration. Now, if we have guest speakers or invited dignitaries, complimentary lunch and banquet tickets will be extended to guest speakers and invited dignitaries, including one guest each. If that particular person brings more than one guest, then he or she is responsible for the meal cost for their additional guest. The national president can get 2 complimentary guest lunches and banquet tickets at national convention. The chapter delegates are involved in the official business of the organization, and if the chapter has funds available, they may pay for convention registration fees, which will include convention off meals in most cases, related travel expenses to and from convention, and lodging at convention to a room not to exceed 6 nights. That doesn't mean the chapter has to pay all of that. The chapter would have to decide what they are able to pay. The Gold Star Mother's Day, Veterans Memorial Day, and American Gold Star Mothers Convention, we allow the national treasurer, upon approval from the national president, to order wreaths for presentation at Arlington on selected holidays, and flowers for other memorials may be purchased from street vendors. Purchase for those will be at a budgeted amount, may not exceed the budgeted amount, and reimbursement for handwritten receipts if the amount is less than $25. Oftentimes, our national president will place a bouquet of flowers, say the Vietnam Nurses Monument, and those flowers she just paid for somebody on the street. Number 7 talks about national reimbursement. All subordinate levels, department, chapter, auxiliary, the organization to strive to mirror these policies as close as possible. So, Section A talks about general consideration. Upon prior executive board approval and eligibility, BSA members traveling on official business may request the treasurer to make those reservations. They should be booked through the treasurer whenever possible. Unused tickets purchased or reimbursed by BSMA funds will revert back to the corporation, not to the individual. Transportation to and from airports and train stations shall be paid when possible or reimbursed. All lodging, as I stated, was made on double occupancy for the pre-approved number of nights, which you'll see on page 13. And if traveling by air or other commercial transportation, reimbursement is not to exceed the amount that would be paid via a common carrier with 21 days notice and considered reasonable and necessary. Cancellation fees are the responsibility of the traveling member on a case-by-case basis. Section B, pre-approved travel for officers committee chairs. So you will see a very detailed chart there stating for each event and each person holding that office the number of pre-approved nights lodgings they receive. On to page 14, travel requiring approval. From time to time, BSMA representation may benefit the corporation at events not listed in the chart. This must be reviewed by the Finance Committee and pre-approved by the National Executive Board. Upon approval, additional guests may be asked to attend regularly scheduled events as outlined in that chart. Participation outside of the president would be to be reviewed by the Finance Committee and pre-approved by the National Executive Board and not to exceed convention body approved budgeted amounts. Now let's talk about personal vehicles. The current charitable mileage rate in accordance with IRS Code 170, which is currently 14 cents a mile. And here comes the word or. Number 2, actual variable cost of operating the personal vehicle for BSA business purposes. Under either option, the documentation must meet the following 3 requirements. Charitable business connection requirement. Travel by vehicle reimbursements or allowance are only authorized for expenses paid and incurred by the officer or the member in conjunction with performing the service to Blue Star Mothers. Adequate substantial requirement. If you're taking this adequate substantial requirement on the charitable business connection requirement, then you would need to show an expense on your expense report, a diary, a log sheet, trip sheet, detailed receipt, exact mileage on your car from the time you started to the time you arrive at said designation. If you choose the actual variable cost for operating a personal vehicle option, you must include the beginning and ending odometer reading, fuel-only receipts, and the make, model, and year of the vehicle used. Claims cannot include general repair or maintenance, nor fixed costs like depreciation. And a route map, like a Google map, must also be included. The request for reimbursement must occur within 60 days after the expense was paid. Here's what we don't pay for: personal expenses, travel meals, internet fees, convention meal tickets not included as part of the convention registration, entertainment, add-ons, such as attending the Big Dipper, travel insurance, hotel amenities, airline travel club memberships, or rental cars. So if you have any questions about this section D, whether you're going to take the 14 cents a mile, which is used for activities, and number 2, can only be used when you're on actual Blue Star Mothers travel, which most cases would be like to convention or to a VAVS meeting. Refer those questions to the National Finance Chair. From page 15 to page 20 is a glossary terms. I will leave those to you to read, but we will start out with the most important one. 501c3. This is the Internal Revenue IRC section that establishes the requirement for an organization to exist as a nonprofit with tax-exempt status. Blue Star Mothers of America is a 501c3. Your chapter, your auxiliary, and your department are a 501c3 because the national holds you under their umbrella. We'll talk about accounts payable and receivable. Payable is what you owe to people. Accounts receivable are what people owe you. We've talked about the accrual method being when you record, not when the actual transaction occurs by the check being cashed or the deposit being made. We talked about depreciation. Assets are those things that you'll provide economic benefit to the organization of value. A computer is a great example. An audit is a financial statement as of a certain date covering a 12-month period provided by a CPA at the chapter and department auxiliary levels. Many times a review of finances is carried on yearly, if at all possible, by an independent person in the community who will do it at no cost. Available net assets, the amount of net assets without restrictions available to support operations. The balance sheet is called now a statement of financial position. It shows your assets, your liabilities, and your net assets. BSMA is also an acronym for Blue Star Mothers of America. We've talked about the budget. We've talked about capital expenditures being purchase is excess of $1,000 or more with a useful life of more than 1 year, which A very expensive computer or printer could be. Cash is legal tender, like bills, coins. Cash equivalents are those things that are readily convertible, like CDs. Cash flow is the receipt and disbursement of money in and out. Contingency, we've had those every year in most organizations. It's an unseen, foreseen event or circumstance. Contribution is their donation. Convention is the annual meeting. Credit is a contractual agreement where you borrow money and agree to repay it. Current grants and pledges are things that people say they're going to do, but you haven't received them yet. We talk about deferred income, which payment received for a transaction hasn't occurred. It may even be into the next fiscal year, as membership dues would be. Deficit is the excess of expenses over revenue. Delegate is people coming to convention on the department or national level. We've talked about depreciation. We've talked about documentation, keeping accurate records with receipts, and looking at minutes to justify ex- expenditures as well as what's in the budget. Earned revenue, BSA MA receives in exchange for products and services. An engagement letter is where you agree to enter into something that has a financial implication with another party. We talked about executive boards. We all know what expenses are. The FC is the finance committee. The financial officers are your financial secretary and treasurer. A statement is what they prepare. Our fiscal year is September 1 to August 31st. The Form 990 and 990 Easy are the tax returns that are required to be filed by every level of the organization. Income for that year is less than 50,000. You can go with it's called 990N postcard. It can only be filed after the end of the fiscal year. If you're exceeds that, then you have to go to a 990 Easy. Fundraising expenses, we've talked about. Good standing, we've talked about. Governing documents, we've talked about. Grants. In-kind donations are things that people give you that, for example, a donor may give you food to go serve at the National Guard. That's an in-kind donation. They're not giving you money to go buy the food. They are giving you the food. Mission Barbecue, for example, does that. So you need to record that. Any questions about that? Refer please to our National Financial Secretary. An income statement shows revenue and expenses. Liabilities, what you owe someone. Lodging is hotels. Net assets is the difference between total assets and what you owe. QuickBooks, it's the preferred online accounting software. It is available through an organization called Tech, T-E-C-H, Soup. They have a certain number of copies each year. Be very cognizant of that, but their rate is substantially different than QuickBooks Online. It doesn't mean you have to use QuickBooks Online. It is simply the preferred method. Reasonable and necessary. Expenses that are reasonable should be within what a prudent person would consider appropriate. Necessary, they directly support the business purpose of travel and contribute to successful completion. For example, lodging during a trip, tolls, parking, etc. Not necessary would be upgrading to a suite when you are authorized a single room. Revenue, money received, stakeholders, we've talked about. Surplus, the excess of revenue over expenses. Transportation, trains, planes, taxis, etc. You're using a personal vehicle. We talked about the 14 cents a mile or the other alternative, which requires a great deal of documentation. And travel, we earn reimbursement that aims to cover necessary and reasonable expenses incurred when traveling on behalf of Blue Star Mothers of America for authorized business activities. If you have any further questions on these policies, please direct them to our National Finance Secretary, our National Treasurer, and or our National Finance Chair. Thank you for your attention.